wanted to talk about supply chain. I think an interesting point to start with is the concept of globalization. The globalization of the economy of the world really affected us during the pandemic. It was hard to buy stuff. It was hard to get things made because we don't really make too much of the stuff we use in the United States. So I think going back and looking at the Industrial Revolution and sort of the culmination of the Industrial Revolution was globalization. You saw very efficient manufacturing all over the world, and it started to make countries realize, or nations realize, that it was valued to export their products and sort of specialize in certain products. So global exports have skyrocketed since the end of the Industrial Revolution, since 1913 up until now. And up to 1870, so before 1870, the sum of worldwide exports were less than 10% of a global output as a share of GDP. So that's a little bit wordy there. But if you look at the GDP of every nation, on average, less than 10% of their GDP was exported. And today, that share is around 25%. So that's on average, some countries more, some countries less. Certainly countries like China are making a lot more than 25% of their exports. Just thinking a little bit more about it too, because come up recently, talking to some shoemakers in the United States, it's pretty tough to get people to make stuff. And I was thinking a bit about Maine, because apparently, and I wasn't there for it, I've just been told that Maine back in the day was sort of like the shoe capital of the world. Like so much footwear was being made in Maine. And I found some stats here. So in 1980, relatively recently, there were more than 16,500 workers that were employed in the shoemaking industry in Maine. And then another 5,000 were in associated fields like leather tanning in Maine. 15% of that entire state was in the shoemaking industry in one way or another. And in 1980, there's about 1.1 million people. So to give you a sense of scale there. So it's pretty sizable amount of people. But remember when in 2020, my wife was working at the hospital and she said, we don't have masks, we don't have gowns, we have personal protective equipment. Do you remember, it's not long ago, but do you remember these supply shortages for toilet paper? Remember that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I do remember that. Yeah, I mean,
Paper towels.
hand sanitizer, and I heard some wild stories about some companies that just had the ability to even make products that would make sanitizing cleaners being sold for way more than they were worth to bigger companies, so they could just increase their output of making cleaning products. So yeah, I think that it caught everybody by surprise, especially people needing things that they didn't really need before, maybe as much. And then people, panic. I don't understand the toilet paper panic, but
I did a little reading about that. So apparently, like you at the tannery, I don't know if you're buying like the fancy toilet paper.
Or at the tannery? No.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
I've been reading that the consumer grade toilet paper was like fancier, fluffier, like more plies and stuff. So when people were at home, they were buying more of that as opposed to like the cheap tannery owner or whatever buying the single ply nonsense stuff.
The one ply that we cut the rolls in half?
Yeah. Well, so I guess that's one of the things that had happened is the shift of consumer. But also, you were mentioning earlier that many of your customers buying leather had canceled their orders. And the pandemic also created a blockage of trade routes. So another thing, let's play the do you remember game. Do you remember when the Suez Canal was blocked?
I don't.
It wasn't long ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember hearing about it. I don't remember looking into it too.
So there was a ship
deeply.
called the Ever Given that blocked the Suez Canal, which is the trade route between Europe and a lot of Asia, and basically shut down every ship because it was all the boats had to stop because they couldn't get through this boat. So there were things like that were happening. That wasn't pandemic related. Another thing that I had learned was there was a high demand for container shipping during the pandemic. A lot of this global trade, we couldn't make enough toilet paper, for example. So they had to order extra toilet paper and bring it in. So longer waits for shipping containers, higher shipping rates, and trucking was already at tight capacity. There weren't a lot of people that were driving trucks, and there was a lot of that work from home concept back then too, even with truck drivers. So they weren't wanting to be outside the home. People were pretty locked down. So you didn't have any truck drivers and you didn't have any schools to train the truck drivers because they were all shut down. The combination of a short supply of drivers and elevated demand squeezed capacity and drove up rates. So that kind of leads me into something I went to undergrad business school, so not like a fancy MBA thing. There's this concept called just-in-time inventory management. Have you ever heard of just-in-time inventory management?
I mean, it's you were trying to use inputs into your manufacturing process as soon as they come in, so you're not the amount of money that you have tied up just on inventory in for your manufacturing process is kept at a minimum.
Is that what you guys are doing at Horween? A lot of
Absolutely not.
Why can't you?
Our lead times are too long to get things, and also our manufacturing times are too long, and there are too many variables for us that we found. And that, like if you look at if we were to try to do just in time for like horse hides, for example, I mean that would just result in supply interruptions for us, and we would be missing out on sales because we have to often buy things when they are available.
So the reason I bring up just in time inventory management is because I was imagining going from no demand and no orders to huge demand and huge orders. You just can't satisfy the amount of inventory that quickly. So I think it's a little hard to start and stop. Your suppliers have their suppliers too. So it's a big chain of events. Just-in-time inventory management is something that I was taught in business classes, and I think is still taught. I think this philosophy has created a lot of the issues that we're seeing because companies like yourself, like nobody wants to sit on inventory. It costs money and space. So I think because many MBAs were sitting around doing their like, hey, let's reduce our inventory levels, created a lot of these big dramatic swings in the supply chain. And I just wanted to mention a couple things that I think are interesting about just-in-time, sort of historical relevance. So just-in-time inventory management was started by Toyota in the 1960s, and they were doing it as a way to be more efficient. They had this thing called SMED. SMED was like a single change of dies. So how quickly can you make a changeover happen? So Toyota was really powerful in changing manufacturing, making things more efficient and more quickly. So they created these concepts after World War II when their economy was just in the toilet. It was really, really bad. More recently in the 90s, Dell was sort of the second iteration of just-in-time management. If I could be misremembering this, but it's my understanding that Dell, their manufacturing or like their assembly of their computers, in their parking lot, they had their suppliers, like literally across the street that would send them, cases and chips and all the components. So that was sort of the next step. So what Dell would do is they would get an order from me in the 90s, ordering a laptop or whatever. And then as soon as they got their order, or even before, they could actually predict when people would order and what they would order. So as their orders would come in from their final customer, they would place their supplier orders at that moment and then just have them shipped across the parking lot to Dell to manufacture them, assemble them. So why don't you do that?
Well, I've heard that example too, and I've thought about that. And that seems, it's efficient for the company like Dell that can take advantage of those relationships. But I think that, those components are still taking the same amount of time to manufacture, and those components are still coming from wherever they're coming from. And then they're just being warehoused across the street. A brilliant strategy by Dell to reduce their inventory costs. But I think that it just pushed the cost somewhere else.
It was abusive to their suppliers, really. It just shifted the cost to their warehouses, their suppliers' warehouses.
It was a cost of doing business with Dell, which is a big company that has a good relationship and you can have a good relationship with and does good business. So I mean, if you want that contract or those orders, then that's what you need to do. So it's kind of a weird. It doesn't seem like a very pure example, but I know. I mean, from Dell's standpoint, it is. The visual that I was always given with inventory management was, if you look at your business like a pond or a lake with a bunch of rocks in the bottom of it, and then your inventory, the amount of inventory you have on hand is the water. That as the water level goes down, like the more rocks get exposed, and the more stuff you have to navigate, and the more careful you have to plan. Where if you have a bunch of inventory around, it does kind of soak up some of your management problems, especially, and your timing problems and your operations problems.
So in that analogy, the rocks are like your business problems, so your manufacturing challenges. Like more of your challenges start to appear at the bottom of the lake, like as your inventory gets lower.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it could be how reliable is your supplier in delivering it? How like your actual lead times, are those normal? Like, are those always the same?
So the inventory is a little bit more of like a safety to make sure you can supply your end customers to make everybody happy.
Yeah. And like I say, if you're looking at your inventory, if you're looking at or approach it from the notion of the internal customer too, where you're supplying yourself to during the manufacturing process. In a tannery example, if there's not enough pieces being output on a given day to then feed the next process, if there's a backlog of pieces that are then going into that next process anyway, it doesn't really matter how fast that process before is happening, right, even though that's costing time and efficiency.
So not only were the manufacturers like yourself not making stuff, but also there was incredible demand. So people were just buying the toilet paper as fast as possible. And that example continued on to many other things. Like for example, for me, I was trying to buy a couch. It was so hard to get a couch. I mean, I know it's like a little first world problem there, but everything was tough to get. So I think the just-in-time thing might have been a partial contributor to some of the issues.
It definitely contributed to consumer frustration, I think, because people were used to getting stuff, ordering something and getting it right away.
Amazon,
like the couch example, like you just expect the couch that you want to be in stock and you can get it that week. It's like, no, we actually have to make this couch for you. It's going to take a normal amount of time for you to get it.
Well, I think that was the eye opener for the country with the masks as an example. I remember people saying like, what do you mean we can't? People could make them here, but not in the amount and the quantity that were needed. I think it was eye-opening for a lot of people that we don't make too much stuff here. And maybe we are reliant on these warehouses that are just sitting on a room full of couches to ship out. But I think the other side of it, on the demand side, we've been talking about supplies, been tough to get. And I don't think we're fully there yet. I don't think everything's normal.
I don't think so. I think that
maybe this is the new normal. Maybe they get rid of the just-in-time thing.
Maybe. I think that it's all kind of driven by price sensitivity of the consumer at the end of the day. Because if you look at whoever's buying the product, I mean, they want it cheapest and fastest. So in the couch example, like if you want the couch and you can get this couch tomorrow, or you have to wait 6 months for this other one. I mean, even if the 6-month wait one is of a higher quality, I've got to think that the majority of people are going to take what's available immediately.
Yeah, I want it and I want it now.
So there's that, and then also, so you have to compete from a delivery standpoint, but also from a pricing standpoint. Like the gowns and the masks. I mean,
those skyrocketed.
Well, it wasn't the reason that we, don't make those in certain places is because you can make an almost identical product somewhere else for less.
Globalization.
Yeah.
Well, so the other side of the equation is the demand side, and we were just talking about people with less money will buy less things, and people with a lot of money will buy more things. When you were talking about canceling orders, there was just a low supply of everything. So very few goods, and there were a lot of people that wanted those very few goods, which is why we're seeing the inflation go up. So manufacturers were unable to produce inventory during that time too, because how long were you shut down for? A month?
Yeah, we weren't really fully shut because we have perishable product. So we weren't, and manufacturing, I guess we were considered essential, however they decided that.
You didn't completely
we
shut it
never
down.
completely shut down, but we also didn't lay anybody off or get, people sort of trickled out, and the people that were of retirement age retired around that time, but we didn't really shut down. But I don't 6 months for some cases, I think for
some departments or some jobs.
I think some businesses,
Oh.
some related businesses.
We started off with low inventory. We couldn't make more inventory, and then people were still getting paid. Like you said, nobody got laid off, and that was from the payroll or paycheck protection program. I always get that mixed up there. So people were still getting money from paycheck protection program. People were still getting money from unemployment. which is great. I mean, if you're going to ask me to shut down, please take care of me so I can pay my rent or whatever. But then you have the problem with low supply, and everybody was kind of sitting at home wanting to buy stuff, and there was no stuff around. So this was the other end of the chain of events that caused even more shortages. The current unemployment rate, people asking for unemployment insurance, is 3.7%. So I think that because there was such a low supply of stuff, we had nobody to make more stuff, and so many people at home with tons of cash just raised the price of everything. We have this inflation now. You were telling me earlier you think the prices that we're paying now might be more appropriate than the prices we were paying before the pandemic. Can you elaborate on what you were thinking there?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to explain this in a way that makes sense to anything other than like in my squirrel brain. But I mean, interest rates were low, so there was strong demand. Debt and money were cheap, so there was a lot of buying power in that regard. People, on top of that, people had relatively a lot of money, I think, because I think, the economy was strong, and despite everything, all the craziness in the world, if you were to look at that in a relationship to what things were actually costing, then I think that number gave the consumer a lot of power in terms of what they could buy or wanted to buy or what they could afford to buy.
Well, I think it's an example of more supply. It's the same thing as the supply chain, but with money. So if I give banks a 0% interest rate, they will take that money for free and loan it out to you and me and everybody else. So there's more supply of money, which lends to more economic activity and sparks the economy. So that's sort of the opposite of what's happening in this current moment. I think you were bringing light on something I found really interesting, is that maybe the labor rates that we're paying people before the pandemic were too low, and that now might be more appropriate.
I mean, maybe to tie it to what's going on now, I think that maybe a more simplistic way to think about it, or maybe the root cause of it, is that inflation itself was actually low, very low, which had the effect of keeping like wage increases lower, for example. I mean,
How would that work?
well, if you think about like the minimum that you would, if you're a good employer, you're going to give people raises to cover their cost of living on a yearly basis. So if inflation is 2% and you're giving someone a 2% raise, that's a lot less cost for the company, and then a lot less cost to pass on than 10%. So if you're passing on to your customer, to the end customer, a 2% wage increase versus a 10% wage increase, that's a huge difference. So as inflation goes up, and labor, there's less labor. So there's sort of like a double whammy where you're charging, or you're have to pay more to attract more people that can make the things that you want to make in a good way. And then also it just costs more for those people to live. So that you have to pay them more for that reason too.
So it's sort of like a snowballing effect. Like I'm not a macroeconomic expert or anything.
I can think you could tell that we're both not economics experts.
But it does seem like it's a self-perpetuating, perpetual motion machine of price. I feel like the value that we as a society, let's say more narrowly focused on the United States, the value that we apply to people that make stuff is quite low as a general statement. I think we more appreciate TikTok stars and famous people, but we don't necessarily appreciate the guy on the shaving machine at the fourth floor of Horween. And maybe this supply chain issue has sort of created more appreciation for people that make stuff, and as a consequence of that, I think people will be more willing to pay for that thing that they appreciate.